I would like to give the floor, and I have the pleasure to give the floor to the representative of DG Connect, European Commission perspective, Mr. Bahovec. Please, the floor is yours. We're looking forward to hearing your perspective.
Okay, my name is Žiga Bahovec. As you know from the name, I'm Slovenian, but Brussels calling. I'm the legal advisor in DG Connect, and as a lawyer, I come usually at the end of the digestive process, because I'm dealing with the infringements member states are doing in the field of digital. That is my main business, but I've been involved in the drafting of the thesis for Slovenia for the last few years, so I'm perfectly aware of some of the policy challenges as well. We have actually strategic priorities of the European Commission, of the Ursula von der Leyen Commission, which is that Europe should be fit for the digital age. And there are 6 headline ambitions of the European Commission. One is Europe's strategic autonomy in critical technology areas. This speaks about, or this stands for artificial intelligence. This stands for high performance computing. This stands for quantum technology. Then we want to have a European single market for data, where data can flow for the benefit of all, and where the rules of access are fair, practical, and clear. And here we need to distinguish between personal and non-personal data. Then we need a cyber-resilient Europe promoting digital identities for all Europeans while protecting e-privacy. Again, we have seen in the past several cyber attacks against some of our member states, but we've seen cyber attacks as well in other corners of the world. We do have in place some legislation, the Network Infrastructure Security Directive, that has been implemented by all member states by now, which addresses actually cybersecurity, network security of providers of essential services, but not business in general. We are going to review this in the future in order to enhance the security of Europe against cyber attacks. On the other hand, we need to speak about digital identities. We have the so-called EIDAS regulation in place, which is a regulation on electronic identification and signatures, which we now see that needs to be reviewed in the future in order to take care of the technological advancement in this area. Then there is this challenge of artificial intelligence. We have come to the conclusion that we need some basic regulation on artificial intelligence in order to take account that it would be human-centric and ethical and would respect the European values. So if I'm not wrong, there is now a public consultation ongoing still on this, and yes, we will come up probably with a legislative proposal in the next year. Then we need a fair and competitive digital economy, but fair and competitive is something, I will come back to this more in detail later on, that we need to update, modernize the existing e-commerce directive. And the other thing which is important is that we have now regulations on platforms. We have a platform to business regulation in place already, and we will need to see, and this needs to be seen in the context, of course, of the free flow of data, non-personal data. And then we need a modern pluralistic society in the digital age, and this is basically combating fake news. Well, we do have already a big chunk of DSM legislation, and I'm very sorry, I'm a lawyer, and as a lawyer I prefer giving you the legal sources so that you can read them directly and not rely on hearsay. So this is a list of legislation. It might be useful for you. One which is, in my opinion, very important is the Directive on Accessibility of Websites and Mobile Applications of the Public Sector Bodies for Disabled People. And there is an obligation of public sector websites to guarantee their access to these services. This is already what is going on now. It is the directive on the European Electronic Communication Code. It's a recast. The transposition is in December of this year. It will actually merge together and consolidate 5 directives in the field of electronic communication. On the other hand, it will be the legal base for a speedy rollout of 5G. That is why we insist so much on member states not being late in or meeting the transposition period. We have 2 copyright directives, but basically it is about the right of country of origins and so on, protection. And then, as I've already said, we have already a review of the directive on reuse of public sector information. There are some regulations in force already. The BE-READI regulation is very important because it actually caps the costs of your calls you do from your country in another country on fixed and mobile devices. It sets up, of course, the BE-READI body, which is a body of coordination office or body of national regulatory agencies, very topical now in Slovenia, as I understand. Then we have the already mentioned regulation on the free flow of non-personal data, the geo-blocking regulation, which basically means that you cannot be directed as a consumer to a specific national commercial website, but that you can choose the most appropriate offer you would like. So it's very important for, let's say, if you use rent-a-cars, okay, not very useful today, or if you would like to visit Disneyland, but it's very important that you have a choice for the same product to look at your own local supplier, or you can choose the web offer, the offer for online shopping for the same product on the homepage of in another member state. Then you have the platform to business regulation, which promotes fairness and transparency of business for users of online intermediation services. You think at the first sight this is very important only for the big boys like Amazon or Alibaba. Yes, it is. It's addressed mainly to them, but actually it's important for the SMEs because it introduces fair business practices and transparency. Then we have, of course, the General Data Protection Regulation, which is within the remits of DigiJust colleagues, and I'm very happy that it's not in my remits. What is in the pipeline? What is in the pipeline? I've already said that we have a review of the roaming provisions. We have the broadened cost reduction review. We have the Digital Service Act, which is actually an upgrade, more or less, of the e-commerce directive. Then we have a new Data Act. As already mentioned, the artificial intelligence, NIS review, and the EIDAS. Wherever there stands review, this is a legal obligation on the Commission that we need to do a review. So these things will happen for sure in the next months or next year, 21. Most of this will occur until the end of 21. Now, I would like to turn a little bit to the Recovery and Resilience Facility, the RRF. One of the 2 R's as reforms as well, because it means financial support to member states for investments and reforms. And as soon as you speak about reforms, you speak very often about legislation or implementing legislation. And what is important here is it's embedded in the European semester. And there is a link with the European semester because in the European semester we have identified investment priorities for each member state as recommendations and reform priorities for each member state. So in the case of Slovenia, we have identified as investment priorities, as reform priorities, broadening the scope of ICT in school curricula and speedy rollout of 5G, assignment of spectrum and gigabyte society and investment in this field. So you can see a link between what we find in the so-called DESIs, the digital and economic indexes, in the country-specific recommendation within the European semester, and in the reform and the Recovery and Resilience Facility and the legislation. it converged in the same direction. This is very actual because the European Council conclusions from October 2020 mentioned that at least 20% of the funds of the Recovery and Resilience Facility will be made available for the digital transition, including SMEs. So there is a provision that, so this means two things. 20% of funds, of course, of funds at not in a global level, but at national level. So all member states understand that's the interpretation or accepted interpretation that each member state will need to meet this 20% objective, that SMEs are specifically mentioned, and there is this provision that can be to a certain degree combined or complemented with MFF resources. For sure it will be possible for Connecting Europe facility and for Horizon Europe, which is a research program, and very probably for the Digital Europe program, which is the program for capacities in the field of and deployment of digital technologies. Capacities means, of course, artificial intelligence, high performance computing, and so on. So you see that even the reform, rescue and resilience package mentions digital as very, very important. But there is, of course, a taxonomy. We are working on a taxonomy. What will count as digital investment? So this is not yet determined, but the work is in progress. The European Council continued where actually should these funds be invested in which areas is what you can see here: digital technologies, which is again supercomputers, quantum, blockchain, artificial intelligence, then developing capacities in strategic digital value chains, especially microprocessors. Then, of course, I'm coming back all the time to the fast rollout of 5G. And especially, I would like to mention that member states need to agree with their neighboring countries transport corridors where high 5G should be rolled out, because it would contribute to autonomous driving. Then we need, of course, to protect ourselves against cyber threats. There are some Slovenian SMEs that are quite good in this field, not in cyber threats, but in countering them, of course. Then we need to unleash full potential of digital technologies for the climate and environmental actions. I speak about smart grids, and of course, upgrading digital capacities in the education systems. We always come back, of course, to education system. Another issue, of course, which was mentioned today, is that younger people coming out from the schools do not have practical knowledge for companies or the public sector. Well, yeah, I know that several applications and are still running on a very old languages, informatic languages on COBOL, and today you will not find young people who know COBOL, so you'll have to rely on old people, or you have to change the operational system. Digital skills indeed need to be improved as well as active labor market measures, because a lot of redundant, older, lower educated people across Europe don't have the necessary knowledge and skills, digital skills, to take up a new job. And we are in full transition from traditional industry 0.3 now to the industrialization 0.4. Well, why is this important for digital? As you see, the reform on the rescue and resilience package includes a minimum level of 20% of expenditure for digital. So probably the main digital priorities are connectivity, skills, public services, and digital capacities, including digitalization of companies. We have very often seen situations where companies have bought new equipment, but there was nobody then to use it. So this is wasted money. There's an example between how reforms, investments, and funding are linked. You have this request for timely implementation of the Electronic Communications Code, which is on the 21st of December this year. And this is closely linked with the signing process of the 5G European sector. Actually, Slovenia and several member states are already late because there's already a decision requiring member states to do so or to have done so by June this year. And this is essential for a speedy rollout of 5G. And 5G, you need to have cross-border corridors, and for deployment of fiber, gigabit fiber networks to the households. And all this private investments, this is primarily private investment, but there will be support from the RRF funds for these private investments. And what I would like to say, that the RRF is not the only source for SMEs or for the digital. There have been other European funds where you can have money of funding, European funding, which is probably of interest for you. As the Horizon Europe, which is typically for research. There will be a European digital program, which Digital Europe program, which is for rather high performance computing, artificial intelligence, robotics capacities, but as well for deployment. And part of it will be for cybersecurity. And CEF, yes, CEF, Connecting Europe Facility, is one part you could combine for the rollout of digital networks like high capacity networks, which are, of course, a precondition of the whole digital society. I think I'm over time now, so I would stop here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bahovec. I think this was pretty comprehensive and a great overview on what is going on from a legislative perspective. And if you allow me, if I dare conclude with a very simple statement, my impression is that the legislative framework conditions are really moving towards and becoming more and more conducive for the digital transformation. So the question, of course, becomes, how can the member states make the best out of this and turn it in this opportunity into real transformation for businesses, and in our particular case, make the best out of it for mature SMEs to get second life.